Okay, I think we're good. Welcome, everybody. And good evening. I'm David Wildstein, the editor of the New Jersey Globe. Welcome to our first debate between the candidates for the U.S. House of Representatives in the 7th District of New Jersey, with Congressman Tom Malinowski, the Democratic nominee, and Senate Minority Leader Tom Kean Jr., the Republican nominee. This hour-long debate is sponsored by the New Jersey Globe. It's coming to you virtually. Each candidate is in a different location. It's one of the changes that all of us face during an era of a global health pandemic. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to make an opening statement. After that, I'll ask a series of questions. They'll be related to national and local issues and campaigns for Congress. I ask both of you to stick to the allotted time. If you go too long, I'll hold my hand up. If that doesn't work, then I'll interrupt. These questions are mine. I haven't discussed them with anybody else. The questions will alternate between the two candidates. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer. If a candidate is attacked during the response, their opponent will receive an additional 30 seconds to respond. And I'm going to reserve the option, as I mentioned to both of your staffs, of follow-up question before moving on. And I should point out, my job as a moderator is to not take sides, it's to not give my opinion. So I'll moderate, and I'll try and keep this debate on track, but I'll look to each of you to make sure that what your opponent says is based on fact. Each candidate will also have a chance to ask their opponent one question. Candidates will have 30 seconds to ask their question, and their opponent will have 60 seconds to respond. Candidates will also have 90 seconds for a closing statement. We conducted a virtual coin toss between your campaign staffs prior to the start. Congressman Malinowski campaign won that coin toss. They've opted to go second. So Senator Kean, I'll ask you to make your opening statement.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Congressman. It's an honor to be with both of you. I'm here today because Congress is broken. We need more leaders in Washington who understand that serving your constituents is not about Republicans and Democrats, or majorities or minorities. It's about building coalitions and getting things done. I look forward to reviewing my record tonight of real bipartisan accomplishment, such as making healthcare more affordable, reducing taxes, and protecting the environment. What you hear from Congressman Malinowski today is a weak attempt to try to hold me accountable for the actions and the positions of different politicians from around the country. But at the same time, Tom Malinowski will refuse to take accountability for any of his own actions. At the behest of his party leadership, Congressman Malinowski has voted against his constituents time and time again. He has put the jobs of tens of thousands of New Jersey families at risk, and in the process even sort of supported a measure that would cripple the life sciences industry and hobble the ability to find a vaccine for COVID. That is not leadership. Washington needs leaders and uniters right now to help New Jersey's economy safely recover from COVID, to fix our broken healthcare system, and to protect our children's future. And that's why I'm running for Congress. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Congressman Malinowski, we'll start with your opening statement.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Senator Kean. Great to be here with both of you. Look, this is the most important election of our lifetimes. And believe it or not, it's not just because of the two Toms debating here tonight. I think we all do understand, though, that every race matters a little bit more this year. So let's get right down to it. I've been in this job for a little less than 2 years. Senator Kean has been in elected office for almost 20 years in Trenton. So we both have a record, and there is a difference. I'm for the Affordable Care Act. He's against it. I'm for the tough gun laws that we have in New Jersey that protect our kids here. He voted against them. I have been delivering money funds for our Gateway project, so vital to our economy. He stood by and in fact thanked Chris Christie for axing the ARC tunnel, which would have been ready today had that not happened. And here's another difference. I don't take a single penny from corporate PACs, which allows me to be independent. He's taken almost $1 million in his career. Here's something else. Yes, we are going to talk about Donald Trump tonight. How can we avoided. But let me say something right up front. I don't think the problems of this country are due to a president who is lying to us about the coronavirus, denigrating our troops as losers. It's not one man. It's not one bad person. It's all of the weak people who let him get away with it. It's the cowardly people who could stand up to him, who should know better, but who do not. So you want to represent this district, you've got to stand up for something. You have to be willing to look your constituents in the eye and say, this is right, this is wrong. That's what I've done. I'll do it tonight. I look forward to hearing Senator Kaine do it for the first time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Senator Kaine, I'm going to ask you the first question. Our nation's holding a presidential election on November 3rd. Who are you voting for president?
Sure, I'm supporting the president. But the real question, David, is about who is supposed to be in the House seat this coming January, who will actually work hand in hand with the next president of the United States to focus on the solutions that are important for the people of this district, who's going to, as we safely grow out of the COVID economy, as we focus on ways to make sure that the telecommunications and healthcare industries are growing, small businesses are there, that we make sure that things like the SALT deduction are reformed in the next economic package, that the person that's going to go down there has to be the person who has a long history of reaching across the aisle, identifying the solutions, and making sure that we can make New Jersey far more affordable than it currently is. And that's a real contrast between Tom Malinowski's record and voting with Nancy Pelosi 97% of the time, and his entire 2 years in Washington, D.C. has actually not accomplished things for the people of the New Jersey. Has actually followed her lead 97% of the time, and that's hurt our fellow residents of New Jersey.
Okay, Congressman, we'll take your rebuttal.
I think there must be some Republican campaign school where they teach you that every sentence has to begin with noun, verb, Nancy Pelosi. When he says that 97% figure, what I want to know is which of those votes does he disagree with? Was it the votes when we protected people with pre-existing conditions? Was it when we passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Act? Was it when we passed a bill on the floor, which I led the debate on, to restore the SALT deduction for New Jersey? Was it the infrastructure bill that funded the Gateway Tunnel? Was it when we protected the Dreamers and tried to stop kids from being taken from their parents at the border? Which votes does he disagree with? I told Nancy Pelosi at the very beginning, I'm not going to support you for Speaker unless you help me deliver for New Jersey on issues like SALT, on issues like Gateway. She kept that promise. Who is going to be Tom Kaine's Speaker? Kevin McCarthy, a guy who is dead set against us on all those issues.
And Congressman, I'll ask you this question. Should Nancy Pelosi be reelected as the Speaker or the minority leader of the House, depending on who's in control next year? And will she have your vote?
I'll say right now exactly what I said in the last campaign, which is nobody has my vote unless they can promise me that they will help me deliver for my constituents in New Jersey on issues like SALT and the Gateway Tunnel and other things that are important to us. But those were my number 2 demands for her this time around. And so I will make you that commitment. I will deliver New Jersey a Speaker who votes with us. I wonder if Senator Kaine can make that same commitment, because we all know if he's in the majority, who the Speaker of the House is going to be, someone who actually, for Kevin McCarthy, who is the Republican leader, denying us the SALT deduction is one of his top priorities.
Okay. Senator, I'll give you a response.
I think what has happened through the House is that those, like the SALT has passed one chamber, but not the other. So Tom Malinowski had made so many promises to his constituents and actually has not accomplished them. A bill like H.R. 3, which would destroy the pharmaceutical sector in the state of New Jersey. Independent contractors, he voted for bills that would get rid of those individuals. But what you need down in Washington, D.C. is an individual who can reach across the aisle, find the common ground, and figure out what we can do to make tax reform real. Because we need to safely grow out of the COVID and have an economy that is growing with it. And that takes leadership. I mean, listen, if I can get a tax cut through Phil Murphy, I can find a real bipartisan leadership down in Washington, D.C. to get the job done on behalf of our constituents. But the problem is my opponent does not work with people who disagree with him. So instead, what we need going forward is an individual who has a long history of saying, how do we find the solution? How do we make our state more affordable? How do we make sure things like the Gateway project that I worked on at state level are done through to completion? That's the type of leadership New Jersey needs, and we just don't have it right now.
One clear difference between the two candidates in this race is on guns. Senator Kaine, you had a 100% rating from the NRA. Congressman Malinowski, yours was 13%. 2 years ago, Giffords, a leading gun safety advocacy group, endorsed Congressman Lance. This year, they're supporting Congressman Malinowski. Senator, if you're elected to Congress, would you expect your voting record to continue to earn you a perfect rating from the NRA?
I think my voting record, I support the Second Amendment, but I also support the strong gun laws we have in New Jersey. According to the Brady group, we have the third highest or second best ratings, and I've been proud to support those measures, including making sure that we have red flag bills and a variety of other things on the state level, which are very important. I also made sure that we reduce the opportunity for violence for domestic violence victims from 7 days to 0. So that type of leadership and that type of finding common ground is important for an individual who's going to go down to Washington, D.C. and find the common ground. But like on the state level, where we have an assault weapon ban, I would support that measure on the federal level as well.
Okay. And Congressman?
Look, there's a reason you get an A rating from the NRA, and it's not by supporting strong gun laws. You opposed universal background checks after the Sandy Hook massacre, the elementary school massacre. You opposed the ammunition limit, the high capacity magazine limit that we just passed. And you know, we do have strong gun laws despite you in New Jersey. But the problem is we've got states all around us that don't. We had an incident in your hometown of Westfield. A guy from Delaware came to an elementary school with weapons looking to shoot people. God forbid that should happen. Thankfully, it was prevented. And that's because we do not have nationally the strong laws that we have in New Jersey. A guy with an A rating from the NRA is not going to get the job done.
Okay, Senator, since the Congressman discussed your record, let me give you 30 seconds to respond to that.
The goal is to find the common ground on how we make sure that the responsible gun owners are kept responsible and that we keep the illegal guns off the streets. That's what we've done in the New Jersey legislature with my support. Going down to Washington, D.C., I would have the same record.
Okay. Congressman, 2020 has been a world-changing, life-altering, complicated, tragic. I guess we could probably spend an hour just coming up with adjectives of what this year has been. The response to COVID-19 has dominated much of your time in Congress. I'd like you to grade yourself on the handling of the coronavirus pandemic, A through F. And while you're at it, I'd like to, in the minute you have, also grade President Trump and Governor Murphy.
Oh, that's a lot in 1 minute. Well, look, as a country, I don't give ourselves a high grade. We were just talking about the gun issue. One thing that really breaks me is that right now, those kids in our community who are in school, who are in person, we should be able to open their windows because that would keep them safer from COVID, but we can't because of the fear of school shooters. Those are two failures. And that really, really gets me. In terms of Congress, I actually think we've been pretty good in coming together across party lines. We passed the CARES Act, which delivered more than $1 billion in assistance for our small business owners in this district, supported over 135,000 jobs, over $1 billion in unemployment assistance. And my office has been working around the clock, person by person, to make sure that our constituents get that assistance. Over 1,600 individual constituents in our district. My office has helped break through the red tape in the state to get them the aid that they deserve. So I think we've done a pretty good job, but we got to get another relief bill if we deserve the aid that I hope we can get. As far as Governor Murphy, look, we were hit so hard, so early. And we will have commissions to look back on the decisions that were made, but I think he was decisive. I think he took responsibility on his shoulders, which is all you can expect from a leader. And as a result, We are the state that started at the worst point, and we are now one of the most successful in the country. If all the country was New Jersey, America would be okay right now. And President Trump, what can I say? He knew that this was a threat. He knew it was 5 times worse than the flu. He knew that it was airborne. And he went out despite that, and he lied to the American people. How many Americans are dead because of that? It's absolutely shameful. And it does come back to our debate about whether Senator Kaine and I should have to speak about our feelings about the President of the United States. Because you know what? Half of your job, if you have this job, is to hold the president accountable. It is oversight. If you're not willing to talk about that, you're not willing to talk about how you are going to do this job.
Senator, this is an important issue, so let's take 2 minutes on this so that we're at balanced time.
Thank you, David. Unfortunately, I think when people looked down Washington, D.C., they saw that it was a very partisan process. It was delayed, and even the things that did come through the CARES Act were stuck in Trenton for too long, where there were billions of dollars of CARES Act funding that was never released by the governor. So I think what we need to do when we're going down and focusing on what needs to happen in Washington, D.C., it hasn't happened. There should have been coalitions to, just as I helped lead the way in Trenton, to say, how do you, back in March, we started to identify things. So he said, how do we take care of the education and make sure that children in every single zip code have the opportunity to continue their education? How do we make sure they're going forward with things like telehealth? And I was a leader on that. How do we make sure that we reduce liability for doctors and nurses and frontline workers as we go through on going through this process? Making sure that was predictable from the very beginning to the very end was something I think that we did very well in Trenton. And I think that's, we're now looking at what oversight should be, and it should be looking at what's going on in Trenton, but also what's going on in Washington, D.C. When you look at what's going on in Washington, D.C., the president should have told people a lot earlier, and it was wrong that they didn't. And when you look at down in Trenton, what Phil Murphy, we've got 7,000 people who have died in the nursing homes, and he's been resisting the oversight necessary to make sure that never happens again. And so, my frustration is that the congressman has been absolutely silent when it comes to Phil Murphy not opening up about the 7,000 deaths in the nursing homes, and also on the billions of dollars of COVID relief funds that were sitting and still are sitting. In fact, we're one of the last states to release that funding, and the congressman's silent on that. So again, you need to identify on the state level as well as the federal level how to find the solutions. And unfortunately, the congressman has been silent on the state level.
Okay. Senator, when Governor Christie canceled the ARC Tunnel project in 2010, you didn't say anything. If ARC were not canceled, it would be up and running right now. Today, both parties in New Jersey support the Gateway project, although not both parties in Washington. Why would the approval of the Gateway project be more likely with Tom Kaine in Congress than with Tom Malinowski?
Well, number one, the ARC Tunnel was a failed project. It was a project that literally was a dead end. It went to Macy's basement and didn't go any further. And that would not have been good for New Jersey commuters. And it certainly wasn't good for New Jersey taxpayers, because we were going to be responsible for paying for absolutely everything, including all the cost overruns. So that's was the problem with the ARC Tunnel. Now, the Gateway project is a far superior project. And it's a project that for the first time, New Jersey and New York are paying, their appropriate shares. And the deal was to have the federal government pay for half. And I was proud to be part of the leadership in the state legislature to help build that coalition. Secondly, I know that, getting things like Port Authority reform through and more transparency for New Jersey taxpayer dollars was important. I was the leader in that regard. We also need to make sure that the oversight approach on the state and federal level and by state to find the common ground to make sure that we get the right funding. So I've led that way as a person who understands the importance of commuting and the importance of cross Hudson travel, getting down to Washington, D.C., fighting the coalitions and saying to individuals, as opposed to being on Twitter all the time and attacking people just because you happen to disagree with them, reaching across the aisle, making the phone calls, showing up, figuring out the right ways to do the transportation infrastructure funding, because the Gateway project is not only New Jersey is not responsible for the cost overruns, but it's a federally significant project that impacts the entire East Coast, and it's an issue of national security.
Okay, Congressman, I'll get your position on this.
Yeah. So the number one, if the ARC tunnel had been built, we'd have one seat ride for the Raritan Valley line right now for all those commuters from Westfield and Cranford and all up and down that line. And as far as the cost, the GAO did a study on this. It would have cost New Jersey taxpayers a lot less than just the tunnel portion of the Gateway project. So Senator Kaine doesn't have his facts right on that. And I can't blame him, because this is one of the worst mistakes that the New Jersey government ever made. Now, he has a vision for how we should do this in Washington by reaching across the aisle, working with President Trump. And that's a perfectly fine vision. The problem is it was tried in 2017 and 2018. There was a bipartisan group that made a really good faith effort to work with President Trump to get him to agree to this. It only made him dig in further. So here's what we've done. We're still bipartisan in the House of Representatives, but what we are doing is using the power of the purse and the power of oversight to compel this to happen, because I'm fighting for my constituents. And what have we done? We have gotten the funding and the approval for the first stage of the Gateway project, the Portal Bridge. So you have two different approaches. One failed, and mine is already succeeding. This is happening. And work on that is going to start probably at the very beginning of next year. That's the difference.
Okay, Senator, since the Congressman talked about your record, let me give you 30 more seconds.
Sure. Well, he's not actually, the issue is, since I helped build the component parts to help make sure the project was done right for the Gateway, getting an individual down there who knows how to actually implement and get the project done and can make sure that there's funding throughout the life of the project on a bipartisan basis, and going to make sure that that is done is going to be very important going forward. And I've got that long history of getting those types of projects done at the state level. We need to get it done at the federal level as well, because the Gateway project needs to happen.
Okay. Congressman, I want to ask you about an issue that the Republicans have raised in this campaign. When you lobbied, when you ran the Washington office of the Human Rights Watch, that organization lobbied against a bill that would ensure that sex offenders who harm children would not be added to a national sex offender registry. Your campaign says that you played no role in lobbying on that particular piece of legislation. Did you play any role in determining Human Rights Watch's position on the 2006 crime bill, and why was your name on the lobbying report?
I did not play any such role. It's not my campaign that says that, but the organization that says that. We submitted lobbying reports that listed everybody in the organization who lobbied on any issue. Now, look, David, my opponent knows that this is true, right? And so what you're seeing here is the swamp. This is why people are so turned off by politics in this country, especially young people. You've got campaigns out there that were willing to say absolutely anything, as outlandish as it may seem. The idea that I would support sex offenders when I've spent my entire life fighting that kind of evil as a human rights activist, as a diplomat around the world, is obviously preposterous to anybody in this district who knows me. And yet they think if they keep on repeating this kind of garbage, there will be some people who eventually believe it. And we know who the model for that kind of politics is right now. Good news is I talk to constituents every single day, because unlike Senator Kaine, I do town halls, usually 3 or 4 a month, over 60 since I was elected. And I know what people are asking about. They're asking about healthcare. They're asking about schools. They're asking about COVID. They're asking about unemployment. They're asking about transportation. I'm going to keep on talking about those issues. If Senator Kaine wants to waste his time talking about stuff like this, be my guest.
Okay.
Hey, Senator.
Sure. I think the question in this regard is, why didn't he was the top lobbyist for the organization. Number one, why didn't he stop it? The organization itself recommend, to endanger children. It's, thank heaven the U.S. Senate didn't listen to his recommendations. He's the top lobbyist for the organization, and they advocated against protecting children. So either he was weak, he didn't try to stop it, but the real question is, how in the world can you work for an organization that advocated against protecting children?
Congressman, let me give you a chance to respond.
I worked for 10 years, Senator, for an organization that won a Nobel Peace Prize for protecting children from landmines. I worked for an organization that is famous around the world for standing up to people like Putin and Kim Jong-un and Fidel Castro, dictators around the world, and for speaking truth to power in the United States of America. When I was nominated for a senior position at the State Department after 10 years at this organization, I was introduced to my confirmation hearing by Senator John McCain, who praised my work for this organization and praised Human Rights Watch. I was confirmed 100-0 in a Republican Senate. So you can believe 100 senators, including 50+ Republicans, or you can believe this guy who I think is playing here with this fear mongering about protecting children to a very, very dark current right now in our politics that I am leading a bipartisan effort to fight against in the United States Congress.
Okay.
With respect,
Senator, you'll have
advocated the position. He didn't stop it, so therefore he supported the position. And the question here is, I think there are a lot of things we can do to find real, important solutions going forward.
Okay. So I had the honor years ago. I knew Governor Tom Kean, the senator's father, and I knew Senator Ann Martindale, the congressman's aunt, and both of them excelled at getting things done behind the scenes. None of them were ever afraid to play hardball. Congressman, I remember your aunt could swear with the toughest of the tough guys in Trenton. And Congressman, I remember your father was relentless when he was in pursuit of a cause that he believed in. And I remember they both worked together. Then Assemblyman Kean was the sponsor of a bill to provide tax exemptions for property owned by conservation organizations, and Senator Martindale was the Senate sponsor of that bill. You both speak about crossing the aisle, but can Democrats and Republicans ever really work together today the way Senator Martindale and Governor Kean did 45 years ago? And Senator, we'll start with you.
Sure, absolutely. We've done it at state level. I've led the way to find common ground on ways to make sure that healthcare is more affordable. By lowering the cost of prescription drugs, making sure that mental health and addiction are treated the same as physical health. Also leading the way on things like the environment and making sure that there's affordability on the state level. You can find common ground, but what it takes is finding the common definitions, finding the common purpose, and making sure that there are no surprises. And that's the method by which you can find the common ground, find the solutions. But because the best solutions are those that are passed with a bipartisan basis. I think when you look through history, the bills and the pieces of legislation that stand up through time are the ones that have bipartisan support when they come through in a significant way in coming through the chambers. When you look at bills that are only partisan in nature, those are the ones that cause trouble over time. And so I think if you start out with a handshake and saying, we need to get this done on behalf of our constituents, whether it's making sure that prescriptions are more affordable, that we protect the environment, whether it's making sure that there are other efforts going forward, that's the type of leadership that we need down Washington, D.C. right now, and that's just not happening right now.
Okay, Congressman?
I have this vision of my late aunt and Governor Kean watching this debate together somewhere in a bar and having a drink and betting on us. That would be fun. Look, there are two different kinds of bipartisanship, right? There's an easy kind where Republicans and Democrats get together on easy stuff, renaming a post office or having a study or doing things that everybody agrees on. And then there is the tougher kind where Democrats and Republicans put differences on policy to one side and stand together for what really matters on hard issues. That's what I've done. As I mentioned, I worked with Senator McCain and Senator Graham and Senator Rubio mostly Republicans in the mid-2000s, to pass a historic piece of legislation through the Senate and the House to ban torture, with Dick Cheney and George Bush on the other side. But it was bipartisan, and that was the only way we could get it done. Right now, I'm working with a fellow named Denver Riggleman in the House of Representatives, who is a Freedom Caucus Tea Party guy in the Republican Party, supports President Trump, deeply conservative, but he will stand up to evil when he sees it. And we have introduced a fully bipartisan resolution to condemn this incredibly dangerous QAnon movement that is threatening the Jewish community and every community in this country. That is true bipartisanship, because it's trying to do something that is hard. That's what I will continue to do as your representative.
Okay, well, gentlemen, it's now at the point of the debate where each of you gets to ask your opponent a question. You'll have 30 seconds to ask your question, and your opponent will have a 1-minute rebuttal. And after that, there will be another 30 seconds for you to say something. Congressman Malinowski, we'll go to you first for a question of Senator Kaine.
Thank you, David. So, look, a few weeks ago, I stood on the steps of the courthouse in Flemington, New Jersey, at a Black Lives Matter rally. And I spoke about the importance of fighting racism, sensible police reforms, but I was also clear with everybody. I told them point blank, I do not support defunding the police, because that's what leadership is, telling people sometimes what they don't want to hear. 2 days ago, there was another rally on the Flemington courthouse steps. Sorry, not a rally, a ceremony to remember 9/11. There was a state senator, Doherty, who spoke at that rally and went on a 10-minute rant accusing Black Lives Matter, good people in our community, of burning down churches, of being Marxists. He said there's no systemic racism in this country. Senator Kaine, you were there. Why didn't you get up, grab the microphone, and say that was wrong? You're his leader in the state Senate. And if you were too shy to do that, why didn't you say something afterwards?
I believe there is systemic racism in the country, and I disagree with what Mike said, that there wasn't. But I've been proud to be a leader in standing up, and whether it's Republicans or Democrats alike, whether it's in my own party or in other parties, to say we need to make sure we have the right answer for our constituents. I've attended Black Lives Matters events in the district and heard awful tales in my hometown of Westfield regarding the systemic racism that existed. But there's a real contrast now between myself and my opponent. I mean, my opponent only criticizes people in different parties. Right now, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar are two of the most anti-Semitic members of Congress in the House of Representatives right now, and he won't stand up against their reelection to Congress. So the question here is, I've been a long history of standing up to anything within my party, and my opponent right now won't stand up to anti-Semitism in his own caucus.
Yeah.
Congressman, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah. I mean, come on, Senator Kaine. I condemned Ilhan Omar. I voted for a resolution on the floor of the House of Representatives, led by Democrats, condemning the anti-Semitic things that she said. Okay, I do this in real time. I stood, again, as I mentioned, I stood on the steps of that courthouse in front of 1,500 Black Lives Matter ralliers, and I told them I disagreed with them on an important issue. When have you ever stood up in front of a rally of Trump supporters and told them that you disagreed? You just told us you disapproved of Senator Doherty. You were there. You missed your moment. You say this when you're confronted, just like you said it when you were confronted with the fact that you raised money for a white supremacist in Garwood. You got caught and then you condemned him. But in the moment when it requires
the second that I found out, with all due respect, I did not know that person's online posts until they were reported. And the second they reported,
I knew
that individual. Okay, well, you didn't share it with anybody. You only happened to share it, Congressman, when it was politically convenient for you. You knew in advance of the event. You could have told anybody else before the event, but instead you waited for long enough.
It was publicly debated in Garwood, sir. It was debated in the Republican primary in Garwood.
You could have shared that. I did not know that debate.
You don't know what's happening in your own backyard?
I found out about it. I told that
your
individual
party.
to get off the ballot. And that's standing up to individuals within your own party. The question here is, and I told that person I would not support their reelection. So are you going to support the reelection efforts of Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib?
Let me, Senator, I want to make it clear. It's now your turn to ask a question of Congressman Malinowski. Is that it? Or
yes.
Or you? Okay. So go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off then.
Look, the moment that Ilhan Omar made statements that I thought were blatantly anti-Semitic, I called her out. Called her out on Twitter. You criticized me for that, but I used that medium to express my views. I went to the leadership in the House of Representatives and I said, we can't tolerate this. We passed a resolution condemning what she said. We made clear that if there was going to be anything else like that, there would be further consequences, and there will be if there are any further consequences. By the way, you know what Ilhan Omar said? You know what her anti-Semitic statement was? It was, number one, that Jews are disloyal to the United States. They're disloyal. And number two, the Jews control things with money. You know who else has said those two things? Senator Kaine repeatedly, the President of the United States. So if you think that we should be calling for people who say those things, who accuse Jews of being disloyal, if we should call for them to step down, not run for office, you would not have endorsed President Trump. You wouldn't have gone to his rally. I'm not endorsing Ilhan Omar. I'm not going to her rallies. You know, this is the leader of your party.
So, Senator, we're going to give you a chance to respond. Go ahead.
Do you oppose her reelection then, Congressman?
You oppose President Trump's reelection?
Congressman, I'm asking you the question right now regarding.
I'm asking you the same question.
Dodged the question.
No, I'm not opposing her You're not opposing Donald Trump's reelection.
Yes.
And you know what he said. You know what he said about our troops, Senator Kaine. You know what he said, that they are losers, that they are suckers. And that is the person you're going to be voting for, not to be a congresswoman from Minnesota and a backbencher with no influence, but to be the leader of our country and the leader of the free world for the next 4 years. What does that say?
Yeah, Senator, let me give you the last word on that.
Listen, we need to stand up for our veterans every single minute of every single day. I've got a strong record of supporting the veterans throughout my entirety of my career. I think that we need to focus on when we go down to Washington, D.C., and we make sure that the VAs are better than they currently are, that we need to go down and make sure that they get the type of mental health care that they need. That's the type of leadership we need down in Washington, D.C. on behalf of our veterans.
Okay. Let me ask another question. And the reality is we're all here in a debate, two white men running for Congress, in a debate moderated by a third white man. This debate is occurring in a district that elected a woman, Florence Dwyer, to represent it in Congress from 1957 and 1973. And during her entire tenure in Congress, she was the only woman in the New Jersey delegation. She's been gone for 46 years, almost 48 years, and now there's two women in the delegation. Now the reality is that one of you is going to win. And my question is, what can we all do, Republicans, Democrats, the media, to increase the representation of women and minorities? And
is that too, David?
Senator Kaine, we'll start with you.
Certainly. I think I've served on the Higher Education Committee in the State Senate, and making sure that we have pathways to successful careers and training is necessary for people in this state. We also need to make sure that each of the party apparatuses reach out to people, and neighbors talk to their neighbors about ways to get themselves involved. The best way to get involved in programs like these are talking to your neighbors, getting involved in an issue of importance, and have structural programs that are created, whether they be through things like the Christie Whitman Foundation, a variety of other else, but also we need to make sure that the leaders of the parties and the leaders of the organizations and the leaders of the municipalities recruit people actively, reaching into each of the communities and understand, as I have, to recruit extraordinary candidates each and every time in the state senate or on the municipal level. That's what it takes.
Okay. Congressman?
Well, my aunt was one of those lonely women in the state Senate. That's why she had to develop that capacity for language that you referred to, David. Look, what Senator Kaine described is what the Democratic Party is actually doing and succeeding. I'm, as you know, a member of a historic freshman class of mostly Democrats who were elected in 2018. More than half of us were women, and it is kind of depressing when you look at the House of Representatives, the Democrats are on this side, the Republicans are on that side. I have a lot of friends on the Republican side, despite what you hear from Senator Kaine, but it is all white guys over there. The women are all on our side. And it's partly recruitment, but you know what? It's not just that. It's because we're the ones voting for the Equal Rights Amendment. We're the ones who are fighting to protect a woman's right to choose. I support funding Planned Parenthood and family planning. Senator Kaine voted against that repeatedly in the state legislature. And so I think, in issues of choice, of equality, of building a more tolerant and inclusive community, I think more and more women just are naturally attracted to the folks who stand for those things. And I'm proud to stand for those things.
So, Congressman, Russia has been implicated in interfering with the last two elections, the last two presidential elections. There have been reports that Russia has offered bounties on people who killed U.S. military personnel in Afghanistan. How should there's allegations that allies of the Putin regime have poisoned their political opponents. How should the United States respond to this?
Well, these aren't reports. It's true. There was just another horrible poisoning of an incredibly courageous anti-corruption campaigner, Alexei Navalny, who's thankfully surviving. The bounties happened. I've been briefed on all of that. And what we need to do is to speak with a single voice. Congress is speaking with a single voice, by the way. I have a very good relationship with my Republican colleagues on this issue, with Liz Cheney, with frankly, the entire Republican leadership, the State Department under Secretary Pompeo. I think he wants to say the right thing. But again, the problem is that the commander-in-chief, the person who speaks for our country, has a soft spot for Putin, and he has actually defended him when he's been confronted with, Putin kills journalists, and the president says, well, we're pretty bad too. Believing Putin over the word of our intelligence community when these things are reported to him. And I can tell you in my diplomatic experience, I was a senior State Department diplomat. There is nothing you can do in pressing another government to do what America wants if the president isn't backing you up, because that government is going to look at the president trumps everybody else, no pun intended. And so look, this is an issue the American people are going to have to decide on November 3rd, but we're also the American people. We have to have an opinion about this. And if you're going to be in Congress and the president should be reelected, we're going to need people who have the backbone to hold him accountable when he sells out our values.
Okay, Senator, let me get your response on that.
Certainly. Unfortunately, the prior administration did not take the election interference either in 12, 16 as seriously as they should have. And there are a number of outside groups, whether they be China, Russia, and a number of others that are trying to intercede in this election. And we need to stand as a unified voice against those types of efforts. Likewise, we need to support our troops in that regard and speak with a common voice, realizing that we need to protect the interests of the American people, but also stand tall for and making sure that our troops are protected.
Okay, and let me ask a follow-up on that. I'll start with Congressman Malinowski. Do you think the United States should withdraw from NATO? And was President Trump right or wrong to withdraw from the World Health Organization?
No, we should not withdraw from NATO. It would be a catastrophic decision. NATO is the organization through which we work to protect our security. Every member of NATO has made a promise to every other member that if you are attacked, we will stand in solidarity with you. When we were attacked on 9/11, NATO invoked that commitment for the first time in its history to protect us. It's absolutely disgraceful what President Trump says about NATO. And you know what? This is very, very serious, because all of the people in his administration who were sane, who were competent, like Jim Mattis and others who have now left, are no longer there to stop him from acting on his worst instincts. If he is reelected, I fear that we will leave NATO. I know that leaders and diplomats from our European allies fear the same thing. And as for the WHO, leaving the WHO, the world's only international health organization in the middle of a global pandemic, refusing now, the administration is refusing to work with other countries on a vaccine for COVID-19, because that inevitably goes through the WHO or touches it. It endangers the health of every single American. And again, if the president is reelected, and he may be, the House will be the only thing standing to make sure that there's a check on that kind of behavior.
Senator, on NATO and the World Health Organization.
Certainly. NATO is that's an entity that keeps us all safe and secure and needs to continue. We also need to make sure that the other nation states are paying their fair share, the 2% dues that are responsible there. And so I think that it is an important check on aggression, Russian or otherwise, and I think it's important that we continue that. Regarding the WHO, there's a lot of inefficiencies that people have seen in that regard, where people are concerned about the data and making sure that we have expressed our concerns in that way, but find out ways to make sure we are working together on a cure for COVID and for the next COVID. That's the type of thing that we can do together.
Okay. Senator, do you favor the completion of the wall along the border of the United States and Mexico?
I do. I think that strong border security is important, but it's not only a wall. I mean, there are a variety of places where it will be electronic. There will be a variety of other places where it will be different modes of aerial. So it needs to be a fabric so that people know that the southern border is secure. But as we're doing that, I mean, as we're a nation of laws as well, we can't allow for the separation of families, because I think we're looking at reforming the immigration process, which is part of this overall conversation. As a state legislator, I've seen that with the impasse of reforming the immigration system on the national level has done, where there are downstream costs of on our health system, on our education system, on a variety of other things, because Congress hasn't found a bipartisan package to solve the immigration problem. And that's a real problem, because it has so many different impacts. But I think as we're trying to find the common ground on not only making sure that we do have the strong borders, so we know who's coming in and who's going out, but we have a process that makes sure there is not family separation. But we also cannot allow for things like sanctuary cities and those efforts to go on the state level.
Congressman, on the wall question.
You know, show me a 30-foot wall, I'll show you a 35-foot ladder or a tunnel. It's a completely ineffectual method of securing the border. I've been down to El Paso. I've spoken to the experts there. What they need is people. What they need is technology, which would be a lot cheaper than the wall. And you know what? You know where we're getting the money to pay for the small amount of wall that has been put up under this president? Congress, a Republican Congress, denied him the funds to do it. He is robbing that money from the US military, from our troops. It's an absolute disgrace. Now, in terms of bipartisanship on immigration, actually, there has been. John McCain led an effort in the United States Senate in 2013, got 2/3 of the vote to pass comprehensive immigration reform that had real border security, crack down on employers that hire undocumented people, which is the main thing we should be doing to deter them from coming, and that made sure that we are treating people here like human beings. That's what I'm for. Now, what happened to it? It went to the House, which at that point had already been virtually taken over by the Tea Party, which is basically where a lot of the House Republican caucus is, and it died. Democrats would absolutely support that, something that was overwhelmingly bipartisan in 2013, but the Republican Party in Congress has changed a great deal since then. Senator McCain is gone. Senators like Mitt Romney are trying to carry on that flame, but it's increasingly hard, especially with this president. I honestly think We can get change this November. We're going to be able to get back to that kind of bipartisanship on immigration between normal, sane people on both sides of the aisle.
Now, Congressman, we just
there for 2 years, and this is talking about the last 2 years. And what happened was, when there are measures that enhance border security, you vote against measures that allow people to go down and send more judges down to the border. I mean, you vote against things like.
I've supported that, actually. That was in our budget, sir. That was in our budget. We supported more immigration judges. We passed a budget that gave President Trump every penny he wanted for border security except for the wall. And you know what? A Republican Congress denied him money for the wall too, because there are enough Republicans who understand that they don't have to pander to stupidity. Okay? They understand that we can actually work together to do things that are sensible and consistent with our values. And what the president then did, in my view, completely unconstitutional, was he used emergency powers to take that money that we didn't give him from the Department of Defense, from our troops. Judges, I'm for. Technology, I'm for. Border Patrol, I am for. We voted for all of those things in the House of Representatives. But do it in a smart way and be humane.
Okay, Congressman, we just passed the 19th anniversary of 9/11. The United States now has some soldiers on the ground in Afghanistan who were not yet born when the planes flew into the World Trade Center. How long should American troops remain in Afghanistan?
Yeah, this is a really, really painfully tough issue. I've been to Afghanistan several times. I don't want our troops to remain there any longer than necessary, one day longer than necessary. But at the same time, I don't want to just turn the country of Afghanistan and the people of Afghanistan and the women of Afghanistan over to the Taliban, a terrorist group, on a silver platter. And right now, I'm afraid that this peace agreement that the administration has been promoting, and again, a lot of Republicans in the House share my concern about this, is doing that. And I don't think ultimately it will be great for our security or for our troops if we leave and the Taliban take over and it's a terrorist safe haven again, and we have to come back. So personally, I would be willing to leave a very small force in Afghanistan, not to fight, but to support the Afghan government. I have very good friends who disagree with that. If we disagree, if that's not what we do, then I think we have to be honest with ourselves about the risks, that very bad things are going to happen to the people of that country.
Okay, Senator?
I think we need to leave a small force there. I think that we've seen that with the Taliban and other entities that are there, that there needs to be some assistance going forward, but it needs to be done in a transparent way.
Okay. Senator, the United States spends $3.6 trillion on healthcare. It's a complicated issue. We could probably spend hours just talking about this between the two of you on healthcare in America. But let me ask you a specific question. Insured Americans continue to face increasing costs for prescription drugs, an important industry in the 7th Congressional District of New Jersey, and for the cost of medical devices. How will you address that?
Well, I think first and foremost, we need to get a lot more transparency in the system so people understand the costs throughout that system. That's first and foremost. Secondly, we need to ensure that we have more private sector jobs and opportunities, people who are doing the research for these. My opponent voted for a bill that would destroy 58,000 jobs in the pharmaceutical sector in New Jersey alone. He voted for a bill that wouldn't allow for independent contractors to exist in the state of New Jersey. So I think there are things you can do on a predictable way while keeping things like pre-existing conditions forward. But I think the larger issue that we need to be focusing on is one of the things we've seen recently is that the healthcare system has a whole slew of cracks in it. So when you're looking at things like nursing homes that were designed in the 1950s and were singular, were double rooms in nature, we need to figure out how we do the Medicare reimbursement rate and grow and find that solution as well.
Okay, thank you. Congressman?
Yeah, he's referred to this several times, so I want to address it. HR 3. he says it's going to cost jobs in New Jersey. Let's talk about what it actually does. He doesn't want to mention that. What it actually does is it would allow Medicare to negotiate with our pharmaceutical companies for the price of pharmaceutical drugs. Look, we have wonderful pharmaceutical companies in our district. They employ a lot of my constituents, but we've got a problem in terms of the high cost of healthcare and the high, constantly rising cost of pharmaceutical drugs. The VA negotiates with pharmaceutical companies. This is the market. This is capitalism. We're supposed to set prices through negotiation. More than 85% of the American people support this. Now, I get it. Senator Kaine takes money directly from pharmaceutical companies for his campaign. That's why I don't take corporate PAC contributions, so that I can actually take an independent position on issues like this that affect the lives of my constituents.
Okay, Senator, since you talked about your record, let me go to you.
Let's see. A couple different things. He is supported by Democratic super PACs that take hundreds of millions of dollars, to folks, and he's supported by those types of entities. I think the question is forcing price controls set by the federal government in that regard will not make this, will only increase the cost of the drugs and also actually get rid of patent initiatives. That's what people have seen. What we need in this district is an individual who knows that you can make healthcare more affordable, like I have done on the state level by fighting for prescription drug affordability, by making sure that you stand up to the insurance companies to make sure that they actually pay mental health parity, mental health and addiction services parity, the same with physical health parity. Those are the things that you can do if you reach across the aisle and find the bipartisan basis to actually make sure that people are not choosing between their meals and their prescription drugs, but you can do that in a bipartisan way that does not destroy the most significant, largest employer of scientists, of researchers, of individuals who are working to make a difference. We are right now in COVID. Voting to destroy the pharmaceutical industry would be like in World War II, voting to destroy the tank factory. We need to have an individual who can go down to Washington, D.C. and understand the importance of innovation for New Jersey. It's our legacy or it's our future. You need to have somebody who can be a partner with the New Jersey governor, whomever that is going to be, to say, this is how we do manufacturing. This is how we have a long-term plan to bring people into this and keep people in the state of New Jersey. My opponent, by voting 97% with Nancy Pelosi, voted to kill the very industry that's going to help us get the cure for COVID.
I'm going to let Congressman Malinowski go, and then just 30 seconds. And Congressman,
nobody thinks that allowing Medicare to negotiate with companies, just as the VA does, is going to kill those companies. The only people who say that are those companies, because they don't want to be put in that position, understandably. And Senator Kaine takes his talking points from them. No other expert says that. What we'll do is save taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars over 10 years. We have a deficit, remember. The most important thing we can do to get the deficit down is to control healthcare costs, including pharmaceutical drugs. And as for your work in Trenton, sir, you opposed every single piece of legislation to implement the Affordable Care Act in New Jersey that actually lowered the cost of health insurance. You opposed legislation to protect New Jersey consumers from surprise medical bills, which is, I think, the number one worry that I hear from constituents at the town halls that I do, people who have health insurance, but they still don't know what they're going to be charged.
Listen,
so Congress, Senator, last 30 seconds.
To New York State, and I think there's a better way, because right now Congress has actually not addressed the surprise medical bill solution, unfortunately, and you can actually find common ground on solving this issue if you reach and say, okay, what states are doing it right? Surprise medical bill, New York did it right. And so what you have to do is go down to Washington, D.C. and say, we've got to make healthcare costs predictable. We've got to get rid of the surprise bills. But you can do that by finding common ground and talking to people about what their solutions are. People who happen to agree or disagree with you to find the best ideas.
Okay. So I'm going to ask one final question before we go to the closing statements. This, as you two know better than anybody, is a hugely competitive race in a swing district. Arguably, it determine which party controls the U.S. House of Representatives. Congressman Malinowski, Senator Kaine, I'll ask Senator Kaine to go first. I mean, you've been going at each other pretty hard. You've taken off the gloves. It's been no holds barred. So my question of you is Congressman, do you believe in your heart that Mr. Kaine is a right-wing extremist? And Senator, do you honestly believe that Mr. Malinowski is a socialist? So, Congressman, this should be a yes or no. So let's go quickly.
To me?
Yes.
No, I don't think he's a right-wing extremist at all. That's why, I said the problem right now is it's not the bad people, it's the good people who should know better and won't stand up for the bad people. That's the problem.
Okay. Senator?
I think you said a lot more things than that, Congressman. I think that the question here is what are the priorities of this Congressman? He is focused first and foremost on implementing an agenda that's not good for the people of the state of New Jersey. He's worked, stood against the people who want to make this state more affordable and create more jobs. And I think we need to have an individual who can go down there and have the courage to find common ground solutions that will make New Jersey more affordable, make healthcare more accessible, make sure that the things like the Gateway Project and the SALT deduction are actually accomplished for the people in the next, starting in January.
Okay. So that brings us to closing statements, almost over. So we'll start with Senator Kaine. I'll give you 90 seconds for closing.
All right. From the minute that my opponent was sworn into office, serving in the Congress has been about serving himself. He has made a career as a Washington insider, and he's followed the orders of the political bosses like Nancy Pelosi, and will always serve their interests before those of his constituents. He has voted for bills that have destroyed tens of thousands of jobs in this very district that he's supposed to represent, and jobs that would going to create cures for the future and the ways we can grow new businesses. This district deserves a congressman who will work for all of us. And that is why I'm running for Congress. Public service to New Jersey is in my blood. I will always put my constituents first. And in a time when I think we all agree that Washington is broken, I will be a leader in working across party lines to find the solutions. As a leader in the New Jersey State Senate, I have worked with Republicans and Democrats alike to reduce the cost of healthcare, to create new jobs, to fight for clean energy and open space, and make sure that our kids are getting the education that they deserve. As a congressman, that is the exact approach that I will take to fix a broken Congress. Again, I will be a congressman who works for all of us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Congressman Malinowski, we'll hear from you.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you, Senator Kaine, for an interesting and spirited debate. Look, for the past almost 2 years, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to protecting our kids from guns, when it comes to helping our constituents who are caught in the worst economic crisis that we've ever seen in modern times, I've stood with New Jersey, I have fought for New Jersey, and I have delivered for New Jersey. And when it comes to protecting this country and our values, I don't just stand with Democrats. I stand with Jim Mattis. I stand with the McCain family. I stand with George Bush. I stand with Christine Todd Whitman. I stand with the dozens of former Reagan and Bush and McCain and even Donald Trump staffers who have come out standing with us, with the Democrats, to say, we need a change in Washington. We need more decent and more honest leadership. Look, even if the president loses this election, it's going to be a long way to get back to normal. This district is going to need somebody who's willing to fight. This district is going to need somebody who's willing to look you in the eye and say, this is right and this is wrong. And so as you look at us, ask yourself, who is going to energetically defend your values? Who is going to energetically fight for your interests in Washington, D.C.? Who stands for the best of what this country can be, and again, is willing to fight for it? It's a very clear choice in my view. I've been honored to represent you the last year and a half. It'll be my great honor with your support to continue to do that. Thank you and good night.
Okay, thank you very much. And that brings the New Jersey Globe 7th District Congressional debate between Congressman Tom Malinowski and Senate Minority Leader Tom Kane Jr. to a close. I'd like to just remind anybody who's still with us that the Globe will be back on October 4th with a debate between Congressman Andy Kim and Republican David Richter. That'll be followed with Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill and Republican Rosemary Becky on October 11th, and Congressman Josh Gottheimer and Republican Frank Pallad on October 25th. And lastly, I hope everybody will join me on Saturdays from 5 to 6 p.m. for the New Jersey Globe Power Hour on 77 WABC. So thank you, Congressman Malinowski. Thank you, Senator Kane, for participating in what I think was a lively discussion on the issues. Good luck to both of you and stay safe.
Thank you,
Stay
David.
safe.
Thanks.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
Senator.